Hi, everyone. Welcome to Environmental Sustainability and Climate Innovation, our global platform that brings together leaders, innovators, investors, and policymakers to accelerate transformative action for a sustainable future. It is a convening force where sustainability is elevated as a core driver of competitiveness, resilience, and growth across industries and economies. As a stage for breakthrough solutions and systemic change, ESCI empowers bold leadership and channels innovation into lasting global impact. Together, we are shaping a regenerative, inclusive, and prosperous future for the world. So thank you for joining us. We're happy to welcome to our platform today. She's joining us from Montreal, Canada, is Hélène Gagnon. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer of CAE. And her talk this afternoon is going to be engaging your value chain in your sustainability journey. So, Hélène, good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to your remarks. Let me hand it off over to you, and I will join you on the other side, okay?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Glenn. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure for me to actually talk to you about CAE's experience in engaging our value chain. And before I start, I just wanted to share a strong sign of momentum that I experienced just last week. I was at our company's golf tournament with suppliers. It's an annual fundraising activity that we do to host to benefit Centraide United Way. And for the third year in a row at that dinner, we had an award ceremony, and we recognize our suppliers for both their operational excellence and advancement in sustainability. And so we had 65 suppliers in the room, representing about 40% of our worldwide spend. And it was so inspiring to hear our winners actually talk at the golf tournament about their sustainability development advancement for both direct and indirect suppliers. But 3 years ago, we had just started really the conversation with our suppliers on sustainability, and now in front of our company CEO, in front of all their peers, in the supply chain, we were learning about their SBTI decarbonization targets and EcoVadis score. So for me, I was looking at this and I thought, wow, we've made some real progress. And so at CAE, 80% of our carbon emissions actually sit in our value chain. And there's a lot of companies just like us. So we understand how critical it is to engage our suppliers so that we can make strides in our own decarbonization journey. And so today, I'll explain how we've made some headway, touching on the 3 following topics: how the pandemic actually shaped our approach, how we created our program that we call CAE Resilient Together, our program for suppliers, and how we unlocked something else, a cohort engine called Decarbon Plus, a model that's now being adopted beyond the aerospace industry and that you can actually replicate in your own ecosystem. So let me start just by saying, you might not be familiar with my company, so let me tell you a little bit about CAE. I'm in cockpit, and there's a reason. We're a Canadian aerospace company. We're the global leader in flight training and flight simulators. We have 240 locations in 40 countries, and every year we actually train 135,000 pilots for civil aviation. And so if you're flying to New York for New York Climate Week, chances are your pilots were actually trained by CAE. We also service the defense and security market. We provide mission readiness solutions for allied defense forces. And our purpose is to make the world safer. And our mission is actually to prepare people with critical roles to perform at their best in the moments that matter. We actually have 5,000 active suppliers worldwide, 800 for direct spend and 4,200 for indirect spend, so covering all of our services. So we're kind of extended, worldwide. So how do we begin, with our suppliers? In 2020, remember, although we want to forget, but we were in the middle of the global pandemic. We were all faced, I think, with, borders closing and supply chains lines that were kind of snapping. And so we learned the hard way that we were fragile, and that fragility has a cost. It's expensive. So we saw shortages and long delays all popping up at the same time. And we saw that traditional procurement, where you focus just on the lowest price and fastest delivery or delivery just in time, really wasn't built to withstand that kind of shock. So we needed to standardize, have more transparency and more collaboration, not just better expediting. So we kind of pivoted and we doubled down on responsible local sourcing so that we could stay strong and adaptable. And while we were rethinking our resilience, we also asked ourselves the bigger question, well, what about climate resilience? And so that question actually helped us shift in overdrive. And in October 2020, CAE became the first Canadian aerospace company to become carbon neutral. We compensated our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions and the business travel of Scope 3. And we did this, of course, by reducing our carbon emission purchasing renewable energy certificates, but also by buying carbon offsets for the remaining of our carbon emissions. And achieving carbon neutrality was bold, considering that aerospace has often been at the center of many emission debates, but it sent a clear signal to our employees, to our industry, and to ourselves that climate action was important. It was important now, not just making a commitment in the future, but that we were ready to invest. And it sparked a deeper awareness about the cost of carbon, especially at the executive level. And that became the beacon of our path forward. So as we emerged from the pandemic and the world started to open up again, suppliers were in survival mode and they were scrambling to restore operations, stabilize their cash flows, and meet all the urgent customer needs. So in that context, sustainability could have been seen as a topic for the future and not something that was a priority. But we knew that resilience could not be built in isolation. It's a team effort. And if we wanted to move the needle, we had to bring our suppliers with us as partners. And so we knew that carbon offsets were only a temporary fix. This was never the finish line. The end goal was and still is decarbonization at the source to get to net zero. And so we shifted our center of gravity from carbon neutrality to accelerating our own decarbonization through a science-based strategy. We decided to stop the carbon offsets with the external projects. This way we could bring back that money inside of CAE to invest in our own decarbonization. And now our emission targets are validated by SBTi. They were last fall, and we have ambitious targets to reduce Scope 1, Scope 2, but of course, Scope 3 coming from our value chain. And this validation gave our roadmap some credibility and reinforced accountability. That's when we actually started to create a specialized team in sustainability inside our supply chain function. And so they have now their own operational KPIs, but their mandate was kind of challenging. They were talking about embedding sustainability in day-to-day, but doing it with our suppliers in a way that would be mutually beneficial, because our message was simple, that no one had to choose between operational excellence and sustainability in the supply chain. We could have both, but we had to make that practical and make that worldwide. So how do we start to get the wheels in motion? Well, the first thing is that we had to spark awareness in our supply chain. So about 3 years ago, we took all of our top 20 strategic direct suppliers, we put them in a room, and we started by doing some training on climate change. We discussed what it is, why they should care, what we could do as companies. We had our engineers right in the room that could talk with them right afterwards to start helping them identify what were the sources of their own, Scope 1, Scope 3, Scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, to help them get the ball rolling. And then the year after, we brought them all back, and then we did an interactive workshop called the Climate Frask. I don't know if you've ever done something like that, but it's very interactive, and you kind of move things on a table, and you explore the causes and consequences of climate emergencies, and it shows you what your choices, the choices that you're making from water use to supply chain operations can impact the environment and society. And the exercise really helped the suppliers kind of really understand climate change even better and help them explore ways that they could make headway from themselves. And then we decided to use some shared tools. So we adopted EcoVadis, a globally recognized platform that rates suppliers on environmental, social, and ethical performance. But it ensured that we were all speaking the same language across the aerospace and defense industry, because as an industry, through the International Aerospace Environment Group called IAEG, we picked that platform for all of our suppliers because we have a lot of common suppliers in our industry, and we wanted all suppliers to be on the same page, be using the same tools, and not get different requirements from different OEMs. So to this effect, EcoVadis gave us a standardized way to assess the maturity, identify gaps, and track improvement. And so then we officially launched our standardized supplier performance improvement program, the one that we call CAE Resilient Together. We first started by rolling it to our strategic suppliers, and then we're expanding from the various tiers. But from the day one, it was designed to be 50-50 operational excellence and sustainability in equal balance. And today, the program reaches more than 90% of our strategic suppliers, covering about 98% of our spend. So our first step was really to put sustainability on the same dashboard as the operational metrics. And if you've managed suppliers before, you know the two acronyms of OTD, on-time delivery, and OTQ, on-time quality. Well, we took it further and we added sustainability as an equal part in that equation. So once sustainability actually shows up where the performance lives on the buyer's everyday scorecard, you can definitely count on seeing some changes in behavior. We did not want to have like a top-down approach where we would impose some requirements and give ultimatums to our suppliers. We really chose a collaborative model. And if you allow me to use a metaphor, we said that rather than just using a stick, we would use kind of a carrot approach where we would look at ways where what's in it for them and for us at the same time. So we laid out that roadmap openly, and we were committing to coaching and helping and training our suppliers, not just asking as a police. So we focused on 3 areas at first with the suppliers. The first was really product compliance, regulation, meeting standards like the EU standards like REACH, anticipating what was coming down the line. And it was clear that if they couldn't comply, they couldn't ship. It was very important. The second is all about human rights and ethics, the basics of responsible businesses. They're embedded, in the first link of the supply chain where sometimes issues tend to arise. And the third is the maturity, the circularity. And using EcoVadis scores as a baseline, we're building that circular thinking in the process from the product purchase order to the end of life stage. And we also created that positive reinforcement. I talked about the awards at the beginning at that golf tournament, but we're recognizing our suppliers annually, both for operational excellence and sustainability. And now it's a source of pride, and that's a bit of the carrot approach. So knowing that we have 80% of our emissions coming from our value chain, Resilient Together, the supplier chain program, is helping us make those targets really real by embedding them in the everyday performance. So what we're doing is first, make sure that we partner and strengthen with our suppliers. So it means that we have shared roadmaps, dedicated to coaching and clear expectation. And so we move the goals from just being transactional to actually building capabilities together. That's where we see the biggest leverage. Then it's all about innovation and recognition. We encourage product and process innovation in 2 dimensions, the technical itself, but also how the things are produced. So that's where decarbonization really becomes a competitive advantage. And when suppliers shine in this light, we recognize them because stories scale what spreadsheets actually start. And finally, we manage risk and ensure compliance. Resilience requires discipline. We treat sustainability like any other critical risk. We measure, we govern, we audit, and we do some product compliance, human rights compliance, ethical sourcing. All of that are integrated with the same rigor that we bring to delivery and quality. It's familiar to our operations team because it's built in the kind of ISO style structures with the green, yellow, red color coding to flag the status. So what we did was really to take the time to build solutions and elaborate on the operational needs of the smaller SMEs, the small suppliers, to make them, tangible and effective. And we're really proud of that approach because it drives real project progress and benefits for everyone who's involved. So let me give you an example. With one supplier, we jointly redesigned the instructor chair of the flight simulator, and that unlocked 400,000 in cost savings while also reducing the supplier's carbon emissions. We also applied the same collaborative approach to another component of the flight simulator, the display system that surrounds the flight deck and provides pilots with a realistic out-of-the-window view during training. And we work with our suppliers to improve the efficiency by making it more lightweight. And by doing so, we managed to lower the manufacturing cost by 10%, and we delivered tangible environmental gains for us and the supplier. So what's different here? We did not create anything parallel, no sustainability parallel bureaucracy. We embedded these mechanisms in what the buyers are already doing. So it really makes sustainability the risk lens, but also the value creation lens. And when the buyers teams in the supply chain, they see that decarbonized progress can shorten the cycle times, reduce energy cost, and unlock new business, they stop asking, why should do it? And they start asking, how fast can we do it? So once those pieces were in place, we could really forge ahead on our journey. So we made a lot of headways with the suppliers. We saw that they were starting to have some decarbonization plan, but very quickly we realized that even when they have a plan, especially the small ones, the SMEs, they would need more than technical advice to keep moving forward. They would need funding to modify their buildings, to modify their processes, to modify their energy consumption. But we're not a bank. We're not an energy provider. We do flight simulators. So we said, okay, that's when we decided to co-create what we called Decarbon Plus. And that's a nonprofit initiative that brings suppliers into a carbon management cohort. So we brought to the table local banks, we brought energy partners like Hydro-Quebec, and we proactively held some small, decided to help the small suppliers get the right level of support, funding, and energy program support. So it unlocks that financing and access to the energy programs. So it's a great example how deep collaboration can actually scale impact across the entire sector. So how does it work? So basically, an anchor company like us, CAE, we identify 5 to 8 strategic suppliers, and then we, like the energy partners, run some energy assessments. So each supplier actually receives a technical assessment, an energy assessment, and it's a practical review that spots ways to cut electricity costs and use without slowing their production. And then those verified energy savings aren't the finish line. They become kind of the down payment for equipment and progress upgrade. Think of it this way: your reduced utility bill is the equity you bring over to your next machine. And then the finance partners, development banks or commercial lenders or public funds, they co-invest with you as the supplier. So the game changer here is kind of the visibility, because the suppliers now have kind of visibility on 2-3 years of likely business coming from us, the anchor company, and they have more confidence to actually invest and innovate. So it's not a formal guarantee, but it's a signal, a demand signal that de-risk their investment and encourages the banks or the lenders to actually help them invest. So then the suppliers install the new equipment, the processes. So sometimes it could mean going electric in steps that was previously running on fossil fuels. They cut their emissions, their energy costs, they increase capacity, they reduce operational risk. And the anchor company, in this case, us, we benefit from a stronger, cleaner, more reliable local supplier base. So we structured Decarbon Plus through an independent nonprofit vehicle with the utilities and the financiers at the table. And that neutrality matters because it signals it's not just a company pet project, but rather a sector level mechanism designed to be adopted and adapted. So here in Quebec, it's not just us. We have the companies in our sector in aerospace that also are the anchor companies and identified some of their suppliers to actually go through Decarbon Plus. So really it's a system benefit. In regions where there's some winter peaks like we have here in Montreal or a constrained electricity grid, the cohorts actually free up capacity on the grid right when it's scarce by reducing waste and shifting loads and electrifying efficiently. So it's good for the suppliers, it's good for the customers, but it's good also for the grid. So let me give you an example. One of our strategic suppliers replaced a gas-based cutting process with a high-efficiency electric alternative. And that upgrade was co-financed through the cohort. So the energy savings actually created their initial equity. The lenders came in with confidence because an anchor customer, us, we stood behind the relationship, and the supplier got a process that was cleaner, faster, and cheaper to run. So the outcome was emissions down, unit cost down, capacity up, and because they became more competitive, they won new business beyond us from other companies. And that's exactly the point. A resilient supplier should thrive in the market and not be dependent on only one customer. So what we've seen is that some peers in other sectors than aerospace, like pulp and paper in Quebec, adopted the same model through Decarbon Plus because the mechanism is actually repeatable. Utility assessments, savings to equity, co-financing, and anchor company demand signals. It works wherever you can convene the right ecosystem. So where do we go from here? We started with some of our strategic direct suppliers, and now we're expanding this across direct and indirect tiers. The more anchor companies can actually run cohorts, the more financiers and utilities can standardize kind of the plumbing of this whole process, the templates, the verification rules, the repayment structures, so the deals move faster. And we've seen peers and utilities stand up their own cohorts already. So our role at CAE is knowledge transfer, not ownership. And so Decarbon Plus is local by design. What I'm sharing is happening right now in Montreal. It taps into the regional utility and the finance partners that we have here, but it's not location locked. I mean, the concept could be replicated anywhere. If you have an energy provider or financing ecosystem and a set of strategic suppliers, you can have the ingredients to our special sauce. So you can adjust to the context and run with it. So compliance and carbon are just the start, but next we want to strengthen this with circularity, pushing data further. So end-of-life planning starts with the purchase order creation, not just at the scrapyard. So we're tightening governance around human rights and ethics because social risk and business risk as well. So just to conclude, let me conclude where I began actually. Resilience is really a team sport. We build this program Resilient together to treat our suppliers as partner, to really make sustainability show up where performance lives on the very scorecards that our buyers have. And then we decided to create an external nonprofit, Decarbon Plus, as a way to help our suppliers further at arm's length, but really helping them to convert the energy savings into down payments for upgrades de-risked by real demand delivered through a neutral platform so others can actually join. So if you run a supply chain, if you work with the supply chain, you can, in your region, actually run a similar program with a cohort. So talk to your utility, talk to some finance partners, identify 5 or 6 suppliers, and you can call us. You know, we at CAE and Decarbon Plus are definitely ready to share what we've learned, and I'm sure we would learn from you and what you would do in your region. So we think that the cohorts actually turn the value chain into value teams, and that's how we move from targets to transactions and from compliance to competitiveness. So I hope we can continue to build resilience together, because that's how we can decarbonize our value chains and our companies. So Glenn, I hope this was useful for the people that are watching us, and that it was tangible, giving ideas to people of how to do this.
No shortage of ideas, for sure. Congratulations on all your good work.
Thank you.
Fascinating talk, fascinating journey. As you said, you started at such a fragile time, right? During the
Absolutely.
pandemic, and here
During
we are,
COVID. Yeah.
five plus years out, and all of your successes. I like the fact that that you incorporated even the not-for-profit
Mm-hmm.
kind of entity in that conversation, because it kind of underscores the good that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way that it's not just always about margin, right? It could be that common good and driving that. And I also loved what you said about being the knowledge, kind of the knowledge transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is important in this area, right? And well, as you said, with collaboration,
We can make
yeah,
we could go further, for sure.
you can go very far, and
Mm.
it's a different kind of aspect as opposed to competitiveness, right? Yeah, okay, everybody's good. You have the opportunity to benefit within the supply chains, independent businesses, members of that chain. But the fact that the collaboration exists and you're sharing things, best practices, what worked, what didn't work, that's a fascinating approach, because then everybody wins,
Mm.
right?
And
And everybody wins.
yeah, you're right. Well, thank you for your kind words, Glenn.
No, you're welcome. When you look at resilience together, right? And you come back and you've got the operational aspect plus the sustainability side of the house. What strikes me as interesting about that is you could have, when you think about a team-based approach, you're populating that overall goal with people from different portions of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could have people on the front line, right? It could be the transportation side of it. It could be the accounting or controllership side of it, but it could also be the admissions side of it, or those that spend time in the sustainability frame. And I love the fact that you're bringing them together, like the title says, right? Like the title said, as you go, and that's important as well. Tell me a little bit more about the circularity part, because we hear that a lot often in this realm, and I've seen, you see diagrams and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes doesn't it be you often it becomes kind of, because it does go around there. You've got all those different links along the way that you have to kind of help and protect, right? Because any one of them could sometimes maybe throw a wrench in it. Tell me a little bit more about your experiences with that.
Well, I think we're starting to really embed that more, because when everything I shared was more about the decarbonization journey, looking only at the carbon emissions. But when you start thinking about circularity, is really looking at the whole life cycle impact of your product and services, from the conception all the way to the end of life. So right now, I'm sharing how, we're looking at decarbonizing what we're manufacturing, let's say the flight simulators, but we're not necessarily looking at everything, for the life that these flight simulators can be operated for 30, 40 years. And so there's a lot there, and what do we do at the end? And so what kind of material you decide at the outset can have an impact on the, when you operate them, maintain them, and then at their end of life. So I think, looking at all of these things and working with our suppliers with that circularity in mind, and, really the life cycle of products is going to be kind of the next step. Right now, a lot of people talk only about decarbonization around the carbon emissions from, the products immediately, but not looking at it more broadly. So that's going to be the next step. And there, maybe in 2-3 years, I'll come back and I'll share a bit more the progress that we're making in that regard.
Well, clearly there's a short game and a long game, right?
Yes.
And first things first, and then kind of looking ahead. You mentioned SMEs, right? Sometimes I don't want to say forgotten, but sometimes oh, well, we're not large enough to participate in something that, oh, we've got good ideas, but we can't play in that arena. The fact that you're welcoming them there and then helping them see the possibilities, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, and that's why, we decided to go with that nonprofit to help them because the SMEs, they did not have the funding. They said they all of a sudden they had a plan to say that's how I'm going to decarbonize, but I need to modify my buildings and my machines and stuff. But I don't have the funding. I don't know, are there any energy efficiency programs I could access to? And I mean, it's not their priority. They have so many other things to think. And by giving them support through the ecosystem, because we as the customer or the OEM, giving them work, we cannot do everything with them. We can support them to a certain level, and that's where we saw we need other players to come in to help our supply chain, and it's good for them, it's good for the suppliers, it's good for us. So it's a way to collaborate beyond just us and the suppliers with the ecosystem of the energy providers and the lenders.
Yeah, well, you've got your cockpit there, and you think about it in that kind of frame of reference. You're kind of like the air traffic controller with the smaller guys. You're kind of helping to navigate, and there's elements that obviously you as the anchor can help with, but then also
Mhm.
just, okay, maybe you're better served here in this particular part of the journey by this person or this entity, and that's so you're really giving a lot of navigational assistance,
Mhm.
you know,
Absolutely.
as well. How about the interplay of, again, you're up in Canada, but you think of just in general, governments, both federal, state, local. How do they play in this supply chain journey? Because again, a lot of it, like they always say, like politics, it's all local, right? And you could have a particular member with these types of goals and kind of points of view, and then they're in their particular municipality or state and things. How do you navigate that with them, or how do you help them
So
along
I
the
think,
here?
yeah, so there's a lot of the requirements vary, from countries. So, we have our own targets that are voluntary for
Yeah,
decarbonization, but there are some countries, let's say Europe, I was referring to the REACH regulations that go really a long way in terms of, what chemicals are allowed in some parts to be used in our products. So all of these things, and it goes like in the detail, and it's much further than other countries too. So helping our suppliers in Europe make sure that they comply with that so that we can use their products and services in our own product to be sold elsewhere. So that's all part of that. So I think, a lot of the role is around compliance and regulation. But compliance, when you just talk about compliance, it's not necessarily where you create value. And the more we talk about sustainability just around compliance is not necessarily exciting, certainly not for executive teams. People get excited when you start talking about value creation. So that's why, when we look and at working with our suppliers, we get that lens of the risk and the compliance, but the value creation. How can we collaborate, work together, and unlock some value for you in terms of cost, operational efficiencies, and reduction of carbon, and for us as the customers? And that's how I think we can really make some headway in the decarbonization journey for us and the value chain.
well, senior management, again, getting on the value screen for them, and showing why it makes a difference, and here's how it's benefiting us, not only from just what the good we're doing, but just here, bottom line, right? The three P's, right? People, planet, and profit. That's still part of what this world navigates. But how about, let's go up a step higher? How about the board of directors and things? How engaged do you find them?
So, just as I shared that we trained our suppliers on climate change, that's what I did, with our board about at the same time. It was about 2, 3 years ago. And we had a full training on climate change for our board. Again, just to make sure that they would understand the basics of what is it that we could do and that we should do as an aerospace and defense industry? What are our peers doing, and where can we really have impact, and why is it important to actually decarbonize? With the board, it's really important also for them to understand our customers' signal. And I can tell you that just in the last year and a half, the number of bids and proposals that require some decarbonization targets and other sustainability requirements have been multiplied, not just for civil aviation, also for defense. So that means governments are putting those requirements in the bids as qualifiers. So it was important also for the board to understand that we're not just doing that, for risk and compliance, but we're doing that also to create value, to make sure that we're eligible to bid on a number of these contracts. And more, the customers will ask us to have the decarbonization targets, not just for our own business, but through the value chain. And that's where this whole topic that we're discussing this afternoon is so important.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, it's fascinating work. You're surrounding yourself with all of these high quality people, partners, and ideas, and you're doing some wonderful work here, including, like as you said, with the not-for-profit. So just amazing work. So
thank you,
Hélène. Thank you for joining us here at our environmental sustainability and climate innovation conference here. Great talk. We really enjoyed it. If we can be of any help to you in your work going forward here, and as you said, we're in for the long game here.
Absolutely.
Please stay in touch with us, and thanks so much for your contributions here today.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Okay, good seeing you.
Thank you.
Take good care. Bye.